it feels to me that Trump over the past few days has been turning up the volume of saying, if I lose, it's because it's been a stolen election. If you think you're on the cusp of a historic victory, why do you need to say things like that?
If you walk past, a drugstore, late at night, in the middle of Miami or whatever, and you're doing like a stand-up piece of camera, you'll get a load of young men walk past you going, Donald Trump, Trump, we love Trump. Are they registered? Have they signed their names on the ballot?
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose, you can vote any way you want. And no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls. Vote Common Good is responsible.
That was the voice of Julia Roberts. She's voicing up an ad for Kamala Harris, which tells women that they don't have to do what their husbands would like them to do. And it's really making waves here and upsetting quite a few on the Republican side of things too.
And unlike most political ads in the US, it's not hitting you over the head with a hammer. It's actually kind of quite subtle and quite humorous. And maybe, just maybe, it's having an effect. Because in the past few days, there is a sense, it may be misguided, that momentum is shifting towards Kamala Harris. Welcome to the Newsagents.
The Newsagents USA.
It's John.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
And we are in Washington, D.C. It is a gin-clear morning. We are overlooking the White House. Autumn colours are magnificent. And it all feels very still out there, which is kind of in sharp contrast to the political reality, which is that everyone is frantically trying to get votes out in these last 2 days of campaigning.
And it's boiling hot. It feels like a sort of Hollywood movie of, the American president, doesn't it? Where the colours could not be more perfect. The white of the White House, the autumn leaves, the blue of the sky, and this really solid golden heat behind us in the middle of November.
If there's anyone that's feeling the heat now, it's Donald Trump, because there's been one poll last night which kind of electrified Washington. Because one thing that's clearly been happening with all of the polls, you obviously will have heard people saying it's the closest election ever. All of the polls show a kind of razor-tight kind of margin between the two candidates. And then this poll dropped last night, not even of a swing state, but in Iowa, a Des Moines Register poll, which was conducted by a very well-respected pollster in the state. It's one of the most authoritative polls that there is. And it showed that Kamala Harris was ahead, beating Donald Trump in solid red Iowa. And she was doing it off the back of women voters in particular, with a 28-point margin among independent women. And if that is anything close to being true, then she would walk this election.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to explain about Iowa which sort of make this quite an interesting state. It has been won by Democrats in the past. Obama won it twice, Bill Clinton won it twice, I think Gore also won it. So it's not like it has never voted blue, but it has been progressively getting redder. But it is full of independents, and by independents, I guess we really mean independent-minded voters. You see that sometimes during the caucuses, which start all these presidential election campaigns. But it looks as if the independents, particularly the women, particularly older women, are coming out in droves in this poll for Kamala Harris. Now, what we should say is, as you said, 3 points is still the margin of error, and there is one very significant thing about the ballot in Iowa, which is that Robert Kennedy Jr. is still on it and is still polling at 3%. So if you actually add in any votes that he might accrue to the votes that Donald Trump is going to accrue, you're back at a dead heat.
But even then, that would be a brilliant result for her.
Even then, it is an extraordinary result. And I guess the question is there a read across? If this is true for Iowa, and it's only one poll, although it is, a magnificently accurate pollster in the past, does it have ramifications for other states and other counties where she's polling?
Well, surely the significance of Iowa is that no one has even considered it until now. We have not talked about Iowa since the Iowa caucus. It has not been on the map. The Democrats have not been spending money in there in any kind of meaningful way for the presidential election. If they are neck and neck in Iowa, where they've been making no effort within the margin of error, then bloody hell, it's going to be, significant elsewhere. Just two other things to add to it, very briefly. One, North Carolina. Kamala Harris pulled her advertising from the North Carolina market, suggesting that she thought it was done and Trump had that. She's piled back in. The Democrats have piled back into TV advertising there, suggesting that they think that race is competitive. And the other thing is early voting in Pennsylvania. It looks like among the elderly that people have been voting for Harris. And again, these are straws in the wind. They may not mean anything. We've been saying for weeks this is on a knife edge. But such straws as there are fluttering around in the wind, they seem to be favourable to Kamala Harris right now.
I would just draw attention as well to, everyone's talking about the Iowa poll. New York Times Siena had their final poll of the campaign, which showed something really interesting. It was much tighter than anything in Iowa. It's more similar to the other polls, but it still shows that Kamala Harris is gaining momentum, and gaining momentum in places that, building on your point, John, many people thought were lost. So if you just look at that poll, she's ahead in Nevada by 3, North Carolina by 2, Wisconsin by 2, Georgia by 2. So the Sun Belt states, she's actually pulling ahead in.
Not Arizona.
Not apart from Arizona, that's true. Trump's ahead by 4 in Arizona. Whilst the race appears to be tightening in the Rust Belt in Pennsylvania and Michigan. But there is I think if you're Harris, there's something that would give you real heart in that particular poll, because there are clear signs that the late deciders are breaking for Harris. So among the 8% of voters who said they had only recently decided on their vote, she won that group, according to this poll, by 55 to 44%. I think what is clear from these final days of the campaign is she is closing well, and Trump is closing badly.
Yeah, I mean, we should say this is like caveat City Central,
of course,
right? Because what always happens,
let's call it Caveatsville.
Yeah. What always happens, and it happens particularly in our industry, is that whatever the result you thought you were expecting, 48 hours before you start expecting the opposite result. And the Dems have got this wonderful phrase that they're using at the moment, which is nauseously optimistic. In other words, they're starting to feel optimism that they never thought that they could, but it's making them feel queasy because they're not really comfortable feeling optimistic. So just put all that in perspective when we talk about the way the race is tightening. But if you are Team Kamala right now and you're looking at what has happened over the past week, then I think you start pointing to places where the damage that Trump's comedian has done to Trump has outweighed the damage that Biden potentially has done to Harris, because there have been sort of gaffes and awkwardnesses on both sides. But Kamala Harris has been very strong in these closing days on the abortion message. Michelle Obama giving this absolutely blistering speech 2 days ago where she talked about women that you loved shivering and bleeding on operation tables. I mean, the kind of language that I've never heard. You've never heard a sort of a first lady on the stump using that kind of graphic language. They do not want the abortion issue, which you covered so brilliantly, Lewis, to go away from anyone's mind for one moment. And I think that is having, an impact just in her ad spend.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think again, from the New York Times poll, it's really interesting that in several of the key states, including Wisconsin, abortion has leapfrogged, overtaken the economy as the key issue that voters are deciding on. So there are clear signs, and bear in mind with Iowa as well. Iowa is another one of those states that has a 6-week abortion ban. And I was reading about, as you say, John, Iowa's not really been on our radar, but reading some of the sort of Iowa press this morning, it was so resonant of what we saw in Florida, which is it's not just about what women who are looking to get an abortion and the horror stories, the appalling stories of women's health and how they're suffering and sometimes dying. It's the fact that Iowa voters, like Floridian voters, are noticing that their hospitals, their medical care, they're suddenly becoming care deserts. No gynecologist or obstetrician or even urologists and so
wants
on
to go near
want
them.
to practice in these states,
Yeah.
and the healthcare system is starting to break down. And these voters are noticing it and associating it with Trump. And Harris is cleverly making the argument that if Trump gets in again, even if you're in a blue state, they will be coming to you for a federal abortion ban, something Trump denies, but is a clear political argument.
And the thing that strikes me about the Trump campaign, and I don't quite understand it, to be honest, is the extent to which they are not seeking to broaden support out. They're doubling down on the bro vote, on getting young men out to vote for him to counter, in effect, the women who are going to vote for Harris. Although I don't think it is just young women. I don't think it's just middle-aged women. I think there are kind of, men who are concerned about this issue as well. And I think that, Trump is not seeking to broaden the appeal. And that, and I don't understand that strategically, because he does need to kind of win over these so-called independents that you were talking about, the moderate Republicans, all those people that are in the middle. There may not be huge numbers, but if states are going to be won by small numbers, try and win them over. And that hasn't been happening.
Look, if you go back to the Julia Roberts ad, the message in that is women, do whatever you want in the privacy of the polling booth, they will never find out. In other words, if you've got an overbearing, slightly autocratic, macho husband who thinks you're voting for Trump, they will never know if you tick the Harris box. It is entirely possible that there are young women, very progressive, left-leaning women, who are also, dating or married to or partners of young men who are actually secret Trump fans and don't want that to be known to their partner. So I wonder whether there is something in what Trump is trying to do, and you call it the bro vote. It is the vote that probably isn't registered. It's a very difficult to locate vote. So if you walk past, a drugstore, late at night, in the middle of Miami or whatever, and you're doing like a stand-up piece of camera, you'll get a load of young men walk past you going, Donald Trump, Trump, we love Trump. Are they registered? Have they signed their names on the ballot? Will they be bothered? They can shout all they want in the back of your piece of camera, but do they actually go and do the paperwork? And Trump is reckoning that they will. They're called low propensity voters, people who don't normally bother to turn up, actually.
I was just talking about the straws in the wind, and we were talking about Iowa, we were talking about North Carolina, we were talking a bit about Pennsylvania. One other straw in the wind that is worth mentioning is that it feels to me that Trump, over the past few days, has been turning up the volume of saying, if I lose, it's because it's been a stolen election. If you think you're on the cusp of a historic victory, why do you need to say things like that? I just wonder whether there is a kind of sense within the Trump camp that actually they know there is momentum and it's going Kamala Harris's way at this stage in the race, and that there is a possibility, strong, that they could lose, and therefore you are laying the groundwork, just as you did 4 years ago, for the possibility that you're going to be coming out all guns blazing after November the 5th and saying the election was stolen from me, just like it was 4 years ago.
There's one thing that might be stopping him from going sort of full guns blazing, Jan 6 riot this time, which is that sentencing that is coming at him on November the 24th, 25th, I think, late November anyway. If he's actually facing, and we don't know what this is to do with the New York, the 34
the hush money trial.
Counts of convictions, there is a chance that judge will sentence Trump to a custodial sentence, i.e. put him behind bars in prison. Now, if you were Trump, just ahead of that custodial sentence, would you be doing it? I don't know.
I think two things are happening in these final days. I think that we've talked a lot on the show about Harris sort of coming into the race late and struggling to find a message at times. I think in the last days they have managed to finally calibrate a couple of really strong winning messages. One of which is that Trump is exhausted, that he is erratic, and she's got this line which she keeps talking about, which he's got an enemies list, I've got to do this. And then alongside that, focusing on the women's vote and the right to an abortion, which of course Trump is playing into by saying absurd things like, I'm going to protect the women whether they like it or not. And the second thing that I think is happening is that Trump is himself, which sort of plays into that first thing, he does look increasingly exhausted. I mean, we felt like we talked about it last week when we went to Mar-a-Lago. He's always been like this. He always goes up and down. But I think you can see with Harris, you can see ever more the age difference between them and the energy that she has. And it just feels like, I don't know, it's just a feeling that I've got that Americans, this is now his third race. He became president 8 years ago. I was most struck by, there was this thing, I don't know if you saw at the weekend, whole thing on TikTok with Gen Z voters, young women, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, discovering the grab them by the video for the first time.
Yeah. Everyone was like, "Where have you been? Why didn't you know about
But of course,
this?"
because they were 10, right? Like, actually,
Yeah,
yeah.
but you know that JFK was shot.
I know, but I don't know. You know
I know,
like,
maybe that's not comparable, but maybe it is, you know?
No, but at the same time, I suppose the point is, like, they grew up with Trump. Trump was the president. He was the normal thing to them, right? And you know what it's like so often one forgets, like, oh yeah, he said that, he did that. So if you were like, in 2016, if you're a first-time voter, you're an 18-year-old young woman now, you were 10 in 2016, you haven't heard this stuff. And they were appalled by it. It was getting shared millions of times. So this is what I mean. There is something sort of almost exhausting and exhaustive about Trump.
I would go one further than that, and I'd say that if you trace back the Me Too movement, right, the Harvey Weinstein stuff, it all kind of kicked off in 2014 when a lot of those young women were, you know, sort of adolescents, coming of age, just sort of understanding it. 10 years on, they're voting now. So this is for some of them, it's the first or second time where they're going, what the actual
gendered election.
Right?
It's the story of the election.
But there's one other thing that I think is kind of important, and it's kind of dull to talk about, but I think is significant, and that is the ground game. Trump puts all his effort into these big showy rallies, 20,000, 25,000, whatever number, he'll multiply it by 4. And that is where the Trump effort goes. The ground game, the boring bits of mechanics of getting people out to vote, is being dominated, from what I can see, by the Democrats, who have got a pretty sophisticated operation going from centrally controlled in states to counties to little towns, where you're going to find people out there knocking on doors, knowing whose doors to knock on, where the vote is, and getting those people out.
And an app that literally tells you which doors, which avenues, which streets, whether to bother, what they've said. As he was saying, like, data sort of privacy has gone out the window this election.
So
right?
I was last night with a friend who had been canvassing, and she showed me this app called the Minivan app, and it's got the details. It's a map of where she had to go, and the 50 houses that she had to knock on. If it was a black dot, they were already voted, so don't bother knocking there. Blue dot, they're going to vote, but just reassure them. White dot, they were out. And it's the name and address, the age of the person, almost down to the name of the cat and the gerbil. And these people have got such. I didn't
we'd get the word gerbil into today's show, but there we
That
go.
was a bet. That was a side bet I had for $10. I've won.
Very serious chat about whether you can work out people's voting intentions by the name of the pets.
Right? Yeah.
I think you can.
Yeah.
So, and I just think that this is going to be significant come polling day. That the Democrats look to me, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm, misrepresenting this. They do have a better organised ground game.
As we've said, this could all be reversed in 24 hours with whatever next happens on the campaign. We are in that stage where once you've said it's too close to call, you have to try and make sense of the numbers you're seeing. And I guess today we're just trying to make some sense of what feels to be ripples in the water.
And in a moment, Pennsylvania. Emily and I went there yesterday to a county that is very Republican, but in a high street where the Democrats have set up and are looking well organised and enthused and getting good canvass returns.
Strong proponent of non-authoritarian government. So I'm afraid we might be headed in that direction.
Still on the cool side of the 65, and then we'll warm up again as Tuesday and Wednesday. Usually warm for election day. Sunshine, cloud, freezing. We're up to 77. Even
Gavin, can I ask you rudely how old you are?
I'm 22, so I'm quite young. This is really my first federal election that I've really been involved in doing the work. Obviously 2020 was my first election voting. Very excited to cast my vote for Joe Biden. And it's really kind of only picked up since then. So.
I'm in a retirement community, and we got together as a small group of women because we were trying to support ourselves in this very red community during these tough times. And the next thing you know, we started snowballing into doing things down here, riding on the Democratic float in their parade in the fall, and trying to do as much as we possibly can to support Kamala and the Democratic Party.
I mean, I grew up here, always was the token liberal growing up, was always the one that kind of had the conversations with people about what it's like to support Obama, in 2008 before I could vote myself. It's kind of when I first got the itch about, looking to kind of volunteer for these sorts of things. And, moved to Colorado about 3 years ago. Realized that's a very Democratic state, so I figured, I'm from the mother of all swing states. Might as well come back here for the weekend.
Can you just describe Ephrata for us in terms of, you said you were the token Democrat here. What is it like as a town?
Yeah, historically it's been a very conservative town. There's a very strong religious influence here, and not a whole lot of Democrats. I grew up being told not to tell that say that I'm a Democrat to people just because we're in the minority. But I've definitely felt over the past few years coming home for vacations or for holidays, I've definitely felt that there seems to be kind of a shift in things. And so I think you see that reflected in the fact there was a New York Times article, for example, a couple of weeks ago about Ephrata and about how things are changing. With people just kind of being more open-minded to supporting Democrats, kind of pulling back from all the weird stuff that Donald Trump says on a daily basis. And so I think there's an opening for the Kamala campaign to do better here than in years past.
Are you seeing that the impact of the overturning of Roe versus Wade is making people rethink whether they're going to still stay Republican or whether they want to vote Democrat?
Well, I hope it makes them think about why they're doing it in the first place. There's this underlying push into nationalism and Christianity nationalism, and it's like, yeah, I'm okay with your ideas and your religion, that's fine. But when you're eliminating other people's ideas and their thoughts on religion, then that's not okay. Because that's what our country was built on, was the freedom of religion and freedom of thoughts. And you can't just say, well, now we're all going to do what I want you to do. But we have to vote on these things. This is a priority that a lot of women, 60% of the people in the United States have already said that they think it should be a right. So I think that is telling in itself.
You talk about the pro-choice score. Is that a big issue? The Dobbs ruling from the Supreme Court that overturned a woman's right to choose.
I think for women in the area, it's very important to see that Dobbs gets re-overturned. I think that Roe v. Wade has been a very hot topic issue. I don't want to bore you with the minutia of everything, but it's just my personal belief is that the government should not have any say of how anyone governs their bodies.
Talk us through what your day looks like. What are you going to do?
Yeah, so I'm doing this all day. So I think I've knocked on about 100 doors so far. Most of the time we're talking to people that are already we've identified that it's Democrats, so we just want them to get to the polls, right? So making sure they know where their polling place is, know how they get to the how to get to the polls, things like that, just to make sure that we try to get as many Democratic votes as we can, because it's going to be a close election no matter what.
When we're going and knocking on doors, we're not just knocking on every single door that we can. It is specifically targeted so that we know that we're hitting and maximizing our volunteers' efforts.
We've decided to tailgate Eric. I mean, no, literally. I don't think he realised what he was letting himself in for.
Poor bloke. Poor bloke. He thought he'd be there for 2
minutes
with us.
Yeah, it was the next hour and a half, because we've decided to take him canvassing. I mean, he's decided to take us canvassing, and we followed him out into this leafy residential, sort of Hollywood perfect sort of street of residential homes and autumn colours and pumpkins on the front porch. And yeah, we've gone door knocking.
What we have kind of going into each house is we know their name, their age, their gender, and their party registration. It's Democratic, Republican, Independent. Other than that, we don't know who they're going to be voting for or whether or not they voted, so we'll find out. So my name's Eric. I'm a volunteer with the Kamala Harris campaign, just with the big election one, to see if we can count on your vote on Tuesday.
Yes, I'll be there bright and early. I'm putting it in.
All right, so and you know where your polling place is and everything?
Yeah,
okay.
Me and my wife. Yeah, next door though. You won't get
okay.
You won't get the Dem response over there.
I say he's probably not on our list. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Am I on your Democrat list?
We just have people that are registered Democrats,
okay,
so we don't know any more information than that.
Well, you got me.
All
I'm
right.
not going anywhere.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
Well, it's gonna be a close election. Appreciate your vote.
No, we're gonna blow them away. Don't you, Hank?
I'll shake to you on that. All right.
We don't all have signs, but we're going out.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Hey.
So you've just knocked on the door. Good response. What do you do now?
So now we have this app that kind of we're able to track all the information that's shared with us. So, whether or not they're strongly voted for Kamala or still on the fence, and then making sure that we have a plan for them to vote on Election Day. So they know their polling place, they know how to get to the polls, they know when the polls close. And so we keep track of all in the app. That gets sent to, smarter people than me to kind of figure out what to do with it.
I know. Yes. My name's Eric. I'm volunteering with the Kamala Harris campaign. Yes. And if you're looking to vote for her, it's coming Tuesday. I am, and I got one of those somebody earlier by mail. Fantastic. I'm actually joined today with some folks that came all the way from the UK. Was it there? Do you want to be talk to them, answer some questions, maybe? Okay. Or just kind of have a talk with them? Okay, great.
You're great to meet you. And just to clarify, you weren't expecting us, so I know that this is a big surprise for you. But thank you very much for talking to us. Yes. So is this the first time that your door has been knocked on this election? I'm imagining not. No, earlier today, but it's been a long time since somebody's knocked. I've signed some petitions in the past to get people on the ballot. But no, this is good, though, keeping people aware. Not that they're not aware, but reminding them how important it is. Is this an easy choice for you to make? Yes. Tell me why. I'm a strong proponent of non-authoritarian government, so I'm afraid we might be headed in that direction. So I think with Vice President Harris, we will have a better time of it, both internally and internationally. So, People have described Ephrata to us as a ruby red state traditionally. Is this a conversation that you feel comfortable having with your neighbors on the street, or is this something? No, it would not be a comfortable conversation. You're right. Lancaster City is pretty strongly blue, and so is the town of Columbia on the river, but the rest of Lancaster County is pretty red. Our local congressman, whoever it is, going back to when I came here in 1978, Republicans always get elected. Democrats come in a very distant second. So strong red community, county. Our retirement homes tend to gravitate toward the Republican congressman, and we have a lot of those. So they go down there and stump the different candidates, and they can get several thousand votes in just one stop. We are 3 days out. Do you have a gut feeling? I'm concerned that the election won't be over for quite a while, officially. I think it'll go on for days with legal battles and frivolous legal battles in some cases. So, yeah, I think we won't know at midnight on election night. One of those legal battles is happening now with Elon Musk, who's been handing out $1 million checks to people in this state. What is your sense of that? It sounds to me like bribery. To buy votes. Yeah, I would. Very unhappy with that approach. Yes, I don't think it's a good idea. And he's supposed to be in the cabinet, and Robert Kennedy Jr. is supposed to be in the cabinet, and that's a really bad feeling too. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Appreciate that. What's the next 6 hours look like for you?
More of this, some more neighborhoods, more dirt knocking, hopefully talking to more good people, and, just looking to do that again tomorrow then too.
Very good luck. Thank you.
Yep, thanks you guys.
Thanks.
Yep, take care.
Before we go, if you are not familiar with the initials SNL, Saturday Night Live. Well, thank you for clarifying that. No. I mean,
if
Lewis,
it is a fetish, it makes you the saddest person in the world.
All right, okay. It's obviously something at front of mind there, Mr. Goodall.
1 week in Florida, I'm gone. I'm done.
Well, SNL is the kind of satire, political show, comedy that is a kind of an American institution on NBC. And last night, and for the past few weeks, they've been having this brilliant woman impersonating Kamala Harris.
The bride and bridesmaids.
Exactly. Thank you for that additional detail.
Do you try and get bridesmaids into every episode we record?
And this is how last night's episode unfolded.
Gosh, I wish I could talk to someone who's been in my shoes, A black South Asian woman running for president, preferably from the Bay Area. You and me both, sister. It is. It's nice to see you, Kamala.
It is nice to see you, Kamala, and I'm just here to remind you, you got this. Because you can do something your opponent cannot do. You can open doors.
I see what you did there, like to a garbage truck, right?
I don't really laugh like that, do I?
A little bit. Now, Kamala, take my Pamela. The American people want to stop the chaos.
And end the drama.
With a cool new stepmamala. Kick back in our pajamas and watch a rom Kamala.
Like Legally Blondula.
And start decorating for Christmas. Fa la 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 la. Because what do we always say? Keep Kamala and carry on a la. We know each other so well, we even finish each other's belief in the promise of America.
I think calling that programme satire is generous. It is weak sauce. And for most British viewers, it's not particularly funny. But when I saw she was scheduling this stop in New York, I did think, oh, you're walking something that is going to be potentially dreadful and a bit cringe. And actually, the fact that it's not very funny, I think helped her because it meant that she didn't let down the comedy value of it. It was fine. It wasn't hilarious, was it? Was it?
Much like this show, I suppose,
yes.
in some way.
It was fine. It was. I suppose her campaign would have agonised over whether this is a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. Well, she pulled out of Joe Rogan.
I mean, I think that is relevant. That she said she couldn't find the time to do Joe Rogan, but she did do SNL, which I understand because Joe Rogan takes 3 hours and SNL took about 6 minutes.
The thing is, what's so weird about this campaign is that I suppose the extra dimension, even with stuff like that, is that you can't even do stuff like that now and hope, well, no one will remember it by Tuesday. Because the early voting is astounding. Like, I was just looking at the stats just now. 74 million as of yesterday have already cast their ballots. That's 40% of the total number in 2020.
In a way, it means if you screw up, there are fewer people that it matters to.
Well, yeah, it's sort of, I mean, it's very hard to game how it works out. It's just amazing. I mean, like 4 million have voted in Georgia. That's 80% of the total. Who
so
voted
Georgia
in
is
2020.
Yeah.
So Georgia's voted, or what it shows is that people are so enthusiastic to vote in this election. It's extraordinary numbers.
I do think that if they'd been brave on the Kamala Shamala Mamala stuff, they would have thrown in the word salad. You know, they would have ended with something really funny. That one of her word crazies where she goes, unburdened by what will be, by what is not. They didn't quite go there. So
they took the mickey out of her laugh though, which was a fair shot.
Fair shot.
We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
The Newsagents USA.